Okay, so everyone, you can start dropping your questions in the chat, your group questions in the chat. If you could please start doing that as we get ready to start. The, I put the, Gavin, I put the instructions on the announcements page. Check the announcements page. I just put it up there. It's 1.5 pages, 1.5. And then I also put, because the website is down, I also put the instructions there.
Thank you.
So thank you. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. All right. So, welcome everybody to this session, and I'm using my, hold on, just make this a little bit smaller. Good, and I can see it. So please start putting your questions in the chat, and make sure you put group one. You should have questions prepared. So we'll get started. So Karina, first of all, welcome. Thank you for being with us. And thank you. I know it's late there, and we appreciate you taking the time to come and talk to us about Girl Effect and the work that you do in social impact. This is a social entrepreneurship class, so all of them are learning about social impact and creating their own individual projects, well, solutions for different countries. And so they'll be posting like questions in the chat, like once we get started and can talk about what you do and how you begin. So I guess the first thing, can we all say welcome and just give her a snap or a clap? Let's do the thumbs up and let's see a bunch of thumbs up going up, yes. Or if you want to push the button, I don't know how you do that with the emojis, that's great too. Somebody could do a bomb, thanks, or whatever. All right. Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Tegan. Thank you, Isabella. Thank you. Thank you. All right. So the first question I would like to ask, like, so when did you first can you tell us a little bit about yourself and like how you got involved with social impact? Did you always know that this was what you wanted to do?
No, it wasn't actually. My background was in fashion design. I went to school, got my bachelor's and master's in fashion, with a focus on sustainability in fashion. But I lived in India in a garment factory for 5 years, trying to change the world of fashion. So doing research in sustainability in fashion, where I got into documentary filmmaking, and telling the story of women behind the label, the women in the factories. And I was introduced to Nike Foundation at the time, who were starting their new initiative called Girl Effect in Rwanda. And so interviewed for the design innovation manager, for Nike Foundation, and started my career with Nike and now Girl Effect, which spans almost 15 years now, based in Rwanda for 5 years. But I now live in the UK, at one of our global hubs. But I'm originally from Texas. I'm a first generation Mexican American.
Oh, wonderful. You're from Texas. What part of Texas?
El Paso.
El
Yeah.
Paso. Oh, okay. I lived in Dallas and Grand Prairie for a moment.
Uh, cool,
Yes.
cool.
Wonderful. Okay, so the next question is like, what is, I mean, what is the biggest project that you've worked on, and I guess the biggest project you worked on that's most proud of? I know there's a lot of projects that you could be really proud of, but how did you approach that problem, design a solution for it, and then work it through to see it come to fruition?
Yeah. It'd have to be Big Sis, our AI-powered chatbot, which is now reaching about 2.5 million users across sub-Saharan Africa, and India. It's been 15 years in the making, but the we conceived of Big Sis 15 years ago in Rwanda when we started using media to change the hearts and minds of girls and communities about what's possible for girls to do and not do. We want to expand the choices available to her. And we set about building a magazine for girls, a nationally distributed magazine called Niña Minga, which in Kinyarwanda and Rwanda means the beautiful girl on the inside and the inside and the outside. And through that magazine, young people started to write to us questions that they had about growing up. They built a trust and confidence in the magazine, and we were just really impressed by the thousands of letters we'd get. We turned it into a text-in radio show called Baza Shangazi, which is Ask Auntie, where every week you could text in to the radio station and Baza, a healthcare worker, would answer your questions. And then that soon turned into a global website. And in 2018, we partnered with WhatsApp to build our first chatbot that wasn't didn't have artificial intelligence. But over the years, we started looking towards technology to answer young people's questions about growing up at scale, which is now Big Sis in South Africa, Wazi in Kenya, which in Kenyan Shang means cool, and Bolbehen in India, which means speak sister. So in every country, we replicate our chatbot and we co-create it with young people. And they decide how they want it to sound, what they want to call it, how it looks and feels. But yeah, that's been my career building this chatbot, amongst other different products, but that one's been probably the most trying project, but been very fruitful in impact and reach as well.
That's interesting. How important is it to adapt, your solution to fit the local markets? Because I hear you saying like different names for each different area, like and involving those that you're supporting.
It's absolutely critical. We work with teenagers, and we use media to inspire them to think about things that are often highly stigmatized and taboo, things related to their sexual health and their mental health. They often don't have anyone to turn to talk about body curiosities, relationships, love, STIs, STDs, loneliness, anxiety, depression. These aren't just common things young people talk about. And to be able to talk about it with teenagers, you have to build trust with them. And teenagers are very particular about who they speak to, how it sounds, whether it's cringy, whether it's someone they trust. To show up in their world and the places where they're at, we need to show up with authenticity. Therefore, we need to co-create with them how they want to engage with us, and how we need to show up in their world.
When you're creating a solution, how do you know when it's time to pivot? Um,
Very difficult. I think what we often see in the design world and a lot in international development is a lot of zombie products in which there's a lot of investment going into a product, the legacy product, but it's not really seeing high returns on impact. But people feel very passionate about these projects. And that was the case with Girl Effect. We deployed a lot of products that we loved the idea of, and we could see reach. But to be really honest with yourself, we didn't see that reach convert to real impact. We were seeing low onboarding rates, low conversion, and we didn't have a really defined metric of impact. And for us over the years, impact is not just increasing young people's knowledge. Girls and young people actually have a lot of knowledge when it comes to sexual health. They're not engaging or speaking to a doctor because they don't know about their contraceptive options. Many of them do, but they're going because of fear. They're not going because of fear of judgment. They're not going because no one around them is going to them, so their sense of social identity is really quite poor. So for us, we set a target where we needed to go beyond just knowledge attainment, because knowledge was actually at quite a high saturation rate. And we set a benchmark for if a young person were to engage with our chatbots, do they actually go and speak to a doctor? Do they walk into the room of a clinic? Do they work with their parents and guardians around the things that they need and advocate for that? So once we were able to define impact metric, we were then able to look backwards and say, is the product truly delivering against that impact? And if it isn't, then we need to be pivoting, or we need to be conducting more research into why it's not doing that. And we had to let go of projects that we loved because we didn't think it was actually addressing the real barriers of change. So we built apps, we built IVR products, and we had to deprecate them over time and focus on the things that were actually working.
Thank you. I'm going to open it up for the floor, for the group, the class, and let them start to ask questions because I can go on and on because I'm so excited about you being here today. Thank you again. So first we have group number 6, Rebecca.
Can ask. So, what is the design research process when you're building solutions for girls in Africa? And then, how do you fully understand a new culture in order to make a relevant project or product?
Yeah, we go through sort of key phases of design. If we are building an entirely new product or working in an entirely new outcome area, so for example, we've just taken on a new program around livelihoods and economic empowerment, which is relatively new for us. We predominantly worked in the space of sexual health and mental health. We'll go through a discovery period. The thing about Girl Effect is, although I'm based here in the UK, we have experts and teams based in market that have been there for many years, have a lived experience, are actual users of our products because we work with a lot of young people as well. So we work with our local teams and they go through a discovery phase where we look at the landscape, we conduct focus group studies. We're trying to understand if we're trying to achieve a certain outcome or an impact, what is the barrier or motivators towards that, especially in the area of behavior change. Why would someone, if we're looking at, reducing young people's anxiety and depression, what's causing that anxiety and depression, and what are the barriers for a young person reaching out if they have severe anxiety and depression if they need to speak to a doctor. So we'll do a lot of research in communities, focus group studies. We'll look at existing desk research, and we'll try to understand what is the gap in that research, because there's often a lot of research specifically about young people. You'll find research on adults, sometimes children, but the specific cohort of 10 to 19, there's often a lot of gaps in the research. So once we've identified gaps, and if a further study is needed, then we'll do a study or key informant interviews to help us understand or help us fill those gaps. We'll go through a definition phase. Oftentimes, the struggle we have is, and we see this quite often, people go through a very extensive discovery phase. People always want to ask more questions, do more research. It's very difficult to get our teams to go through a definition phase. It's often called the double diamond in design. You expand, but then you have to contract. You have to be able to take all the insights, all the research you've done, and focus on what are the things that are most important for your audience. And so we'll run a design sprint, do a definition of how are we going to define what are the parameters that we're working with. How do you combine what is feasible with the budget you have, what is desirable for a teenager, and what is viable from an impact point of view. We're usually trying to get to a sweet spot in the middle because we don't have all the money in the world, we don't have all the time in the world, and young people don't have all the patience in the world for us to design the perfect product. We're designing in an imperfect world. Once we've gone through that defined phase, we'll go through a brainstorming phase, and that's where co-creation with young people is really important. As we're brainstorming ideas, we'll actively invite young people into the process of how should this show up in your world. The struggle I often have with my teams is that they're going to project what is familiar in their reality, websites, apps, things that they're comfortable with or things that appeal to them, and they project that into the design process. And so you really have to remove your world out of that and really listen to young people and what works in their world. They don't have mobile phones that are on the latest operating systems. They have huge cost barriers when it comes to data access. Their phone access is often censored or shared mobile phones. So we have to work within the parameters of what's realistic in their world. And so we'll brainstorm solutions with them. And we'll start to go into the next phase, which is prototyping, paper prototyping. Something often you see in the international development sector is people spend about a year trying to design the perfect product. What we try to do is get to a prototype of that product, or what's sometimes referred to as a minimum viable product, something that kind of represents the goals of your intervention that you can deploy quite rapidly and try and test quite quickly in a real world setting. So we'll go through prototyping phase or a minimum viable product phase, and then we'll go into a pilot. We'll soft launch that with a limited number of users, often called an alpha version of your product. And then you'll learn in the real world setting, how to actually build awareness for your product, how do you market it, how do you convert users to your product, and how do you optimize across a conversion funnel. And so we'll run through that pilot. And once we feel like we have a successful pilot, we're achieving the goals that we want to, then you go through scale up and try and scale that. Usually most funders will fund you through a pilot phase, and then you'll have to go for follow-on funding for scale up. That's a long answer. I hope that was helpful.
Thank you. That was really good. Thank you. Next, we have Ethan.
So our group question was, you kind of touched on it already, but when trying to scale an AI system internationally, how do you best approach making it suitable for different cultures?
Yeah, absolutely. With our infrastructure, we build our infrastructure centrally. It's quite difficult when you're working with a global organization because you have teams. We have 10 different markets at the moment. Every team wants to build their own products. And for some time, we had every team building a product on different software, hosting it differently, security was set up differently. What I do over the last 15 years is I've built central infrastructure. So we build the technology centrally. And then when it comes to adapting it, the decisions that need to be made around adapting are things around how does that turn up in terms of the features that young people access? What does the website interface need to look like? What does the content need to look like? Those need to be culturally rooted. So the models can be centralized. We have an infrastructure that can plug and play any model, whether that's Claude, Gemini, GPT, DeepSeek, whatever it is. But then we add layers to adapt it. So whether that's a prompt engineering layer to ensure that it is tonally correct, whether that's validation exercises to ensure that it is contextually appropriate, it's responding with what is cultural information rather than just pointing girls to Planned Parenthood that doesn't exist in any of our markets. We go through validation, and that's through retrieval augmentation generation, forcing or building in a guardrail that limits the model from pulling data from a very specific source that's vetted by our team. So the models are centralized, the hosting is so centralized, but the way it shows up and the decisions that are made on the content, the tone, the accuracy, the cultural appropriateness, that's all adapted per country we operate in.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next we have Gab. I think, wait, pause. Who's next?
I think it is me.
Okay, yes, go ahead.
So I just said, like, we did like a case study towards the beginning of the class, and it was like we went through this like a different AI model, and it used like the I can't remember the exact name for it, but it was like the multi-armed bandit system. And like it just like in the end it seemed like it had quite a bit of bias. So I was like, my question, our group's question was, with it being such like sensitive topics, how did you make sure to avoid bias if there was any, like through your study?
Yeah, there was a lot of bias. GPT came out in 2023. By that point, we had already been working with artificial intelligence for 5 years. We were working with traditional models like Google BERT. But when GPT came out, we both were impressed by the power of it. It was able to understand languages that older machine models weren't able to understand, but also noticed quite quickly inaccuracy and bias. A lot of the bias was cultural bias because it was trained on data that's largely born out of majority languages or Western data. It just didn't understand the reality of the young people we're working in and the countries we're working in. So the most important thing when you're building AI, especially generative AI, is what's called an eval framework. An evaluation framework is essentially an observability framework. It's basically able to grade the outputs of your model, and you have to hone the metrics that you base that eval framework on. We produced a white paper that breaks down Girl Effect's eval framework. So we have metrics that are dedicated to accuracy, metrics that are dedicated to safety. A lot of young people confide in us, really sensitive information, sometimes in emergency situations. So we have safety metrics. But the biggest metric, the most difficult metric that we had to deal with was context. Yes, it was bias, and we could see that bias, but the hardest thing to grade and get right was cultural context. Again, things like there are certain practices, cultural practices, certain services in countries. That's where we saw the models hallucinate the most. We would ask for the model, "Can you give me a health service in South Africa?" It was generating phone numbers out of nowhere. We would call the phone numbers, and they belonged to actual individuals in South Africa, just personal individuals. So the eval framework allows us to monitor that at scale. We answer about 80,000 questions from young people every day. We can't see every single question it's going to generate. And that gives us a live dashboard where we're able to see, is a model performing 99% accuracy, safety, cultural appropriateness. And that took about 2 years to get an eval framework in place where we felt that we could grade the outputs generated in real time. And that had to go through many phases of testing that with the local teams, retraining the models to be able to increase the accuracy setting and get to a threshold that we thought was safe, because we're working with very, very vulnerable audiences, and getting it wrong at scale can create real harm.
Thank you.
Thank you. Brian is next, group 11.
Okay. So Professor, because our project is in this class is about healthcare, so I'm wondering, is in the sensitive areas like the healthcare or the teenagers, how do you build the user trust, especially among the population with limited access to the technology?
Yeah, I think I'd actually push back on limited access to technology. I think that's often an assumption that we have, but what we do see across many of the geos we have, that's not to say that there are a lot of countries and regions in which we wouldn't be able to deploy digital intervention. Yes, access is limited. Mass media would be the most appropriate form to distribute communication through. But there are countries across Africa and South Asia where we do see significant mobile access, and mobile penetration is quite deep. So in Kenya, 80% of young people own a mobile phone in urban areas, and that maybe might go down to 60% in rural areas. In South Africa, 80% of young people also have access to a mobile phone. In India, it's similar. So Girl Effect kind of distinguished between what's called a digitally led market and a non-digitally led market. If it's digitally led, and we believe we can reach young people through their mobile phones, we'll deploy things like social media campaigns, chatbots, etc. In markets like Ethiopia and Tanzania, we'll use more mass media products, TV, radio, community outreach programming. So we flex the products based off of what we feel is most appropriate in how to reach young people. And then you said something about trust as well. Trust is created through proximity, making sure that those people that are designing, building, creating the products have as close to live experience to the people we're trying to reach, which is why Girl Effect runs a very country-led operation. Teams in each country decide what they want to do. And then through co-creation, by ensuring that we don't just go to young people one time and extract insights out of them. They're very much part of the entire process from discovery through implementation. So in every country we operate a youth advisory board. We have 15 youth advisors that are constantly feeding back on our work and giving us inputs. And that helps to build trust in our work.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now I have group 8, Young Ju.
Hi, Professor.
Hi.
Hi, Madam. I want to know what's the hardest part of keeping big cities safe and judgment-free. Today's laws and religions vary so much globally.
Yeah, I would say sometimes the hardest part is the things that we can't control of in the environment, as you said, like laws, policy. I can't control how good the service that we're signposting is to that when a girl young walks in through a clinic, will she be judged? So it's really quite difficult to manage the expectations of our users. We're asking them to take very brave choices and actions and operate in the real world. And for many young girls and young people, that world is imperfect. The road to get to the clinic is very, very far. The clinic might be in her community, but if she walks through the doors of that clinic is known as a clinic that you go to get HIV testing. So her reputation and the fear of judgment are huge barriers. So this goes back to having teams embedded in each of our countries, and not just embedded in an urban area. Wherever we run programs, we have partnerships with local communities. We work with local government, and we partner with ministries across each of the countries because we want to align with their own agenda. And that helps us to map what we think are safe and services that we can work with. That helps us to create escalation if a young person were to be in harm. How do we escalate that and ensure either local police or someone can support them if they are indeed in need of urgent help? I think when a girl leaves our ecosystem, it's well and good to talk to a big sis chatbot and ask questions. Before asking her to walk through the door of a clinic or speak to a mental health therapist, we still have a duty of care, ensuring that those experiences are safe. And that just requires us to partner with them in meaningful ways and not just say, hey, good luck with that. We also try to prepare young people. We know often it's going to go wrong. And so we try to ensure that in our education, we can inform them of their rights and how to prepare if it does go wrong and who to reach out to if it does.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. So Junyao Chu, Group 2.
Hi, Professor. I want to ask that with the rapid advancement of generative AI, how does Scroll Effect manage the hallucination risks of chatbots when the stakes like reproductive and mental health are so high?
Yeah, absolutely. So firstly, Girl Effect has answered about 50 million questions from young people over the last 10 years. We know what young people and girls ask when it comes to growing up. And it's fairly consistent across each of our countries. I think any of us who are or have been teenagers remember the types of questions we had, whether it was our body curiosities, love and relationships, etc. And what we know that generative AI is really good at is it's really good at pattern recognition. It's really good at predicting a response. And if you know what those questions are, you can actually predict that with a high degree of accuracy and control for hallucination. Girl Effect makes a big distinction between the types of questions we feel comfortable for generative AI to respond to and the types of questions that actually still needs a human response. And what we know is that 70% of the questions that we get are usually those frequently asked questions that young people have across the world, which we have 100% confidence that generative AI can work really well, and we can observe that through our eval framework. Now, when it comes to very sensitive questions, especially things that when she's disclosing rape or abuse or an emergency situation, it is not appropriate to be using generative AI in those situations. So our chatbots have human in the loop functionality. We have 5 operators in each of our countries that at any point, whether it's through a high risk disclosure, gets sent to a human operator to review and respond in that moment. So about 30% of those questions will go through escalation, and a human still needs to be able to respond in that moment. Again, we're working with vulnerable populations. We have a huge duty of care to do no harm, and designing safety from the first part is very, very important to us. And understanding both the opportunity and power of generative AI, but the responsibility of knowing what it's good at and what it's not good at is really, really important. And that's, for us, for Girl Effect, still means that human oversight and human integration is still very important to that experience.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Brody, Group 10.
Hi, we were wondering, like in terms of the zombie products that you were talking about earlier, if you had ever had experience in a situation like that, and how you decided to move towards a new project or revise and redeploy the initial one.
Um, I'd say our biggest zombie product was a product called Springster. It was a mobile website that was created for what was then internet.org, pre-Meta. It was a Facebook initiative. And the beauty of it is because internet.org basically zero rated these websites worldwide. We had huge traffic. 500 million young people across 75 countries were accessing these websites. And it was a huge success story. But over time, what we noticed, it was largely vanity metrics. It was a lot of reach, but it was very poor quality reach. So as soon as we saw people land on the websites, about 80% of them, 90% in some countries, completely bounced within 5 seconds. And that's because we couldn't control for who was actually reaching these websites, which were not a lot of young people. It was a lot of adults. Men were accessing these websites because effectively internet.org, it was just a website and there were all these other links you could go to. So there was no real marketing funnel there. It was just for anyone and everyone. But I think oftentimes in international development, people are trying to chase a vanity metric. You see this quite often, even in the VC world. Reach is incredibly important. But for us, as an impact-driven organization measured by impact, those numbers were not converting to actual people consuming content, to actual real change. But for so long, it was such a vanity number that we weren't really willing to let go of that. But as soon as internet.org shut down, those websites all completely died. And over time, young people just don't go to websites. Most of their time is spent on social media, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. But there were still many people in the organization that were very passionate about the websites. Websites are just sometimes really nice and fun to make. They look cool. We can make them look sexy. So it was very difficult for teams to let go of that product. Many of them who spent 5 years working on it. But yeah, either what happens is there's attrition, strategies shift, and they kind of get marginalized, these products. I can't say that we made an active attempt to say this didn't work. It was largely people who had left the project. The product was no longer giving vanity metrics. And internet.org died. And so it kind of died a slow and terrible death. And 10 years later, we deprecated an infrastructure that we were maintaining at high costs. So these are lessons learned across the sector. We see it quite often. But yeah, we try to be proactive, but I can't say. It's really difficult to know if you have a zombie product or not.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Next, we have Zhang, Group 5, I think.
Okay. So good afternoon. So our group were wondering that since you have reached millions of users, so what is one of the most surprising pieces of feedback you've received from the girls that fundamentally change how you approach the AI design, something like that?
It's a good question. If you're co-creating with young people in the right ways, they'll make known. they'll tell you if they hate your product. Especially in South Africa, we work with a lot of young people and girls, and they constantly humble me and tell me how cringe our product is and our social media is, which is always a good thing. But when it comes to feedback around AI, the biggest and hardest thing, the biggest feedback we get, and the hardest thing to design for is tone. Getting the tonality of the content generated by the models, because tone shifts. Girls and young people want the tone to shift based off the discussion. So if you're talking about mental health or something serious, they want you to speak in a much more serious but lighthearted tone. If you're just talking about love and relationships, they really want you to be vibrant and funny and cool. So being able to understand in each context, young people want you to, and again, this goes back to trust in young people. If you get the tone wrong, if you get the language, and if you get the slang wrong, then you lose trust quite instantly. You're either cringe or you're non-credible, or why would I even listen to you? You don't even sound like me. So that's often the most difficult thing to get right when working with AI and co-creating with young people.
Got you. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Shemai, excuse me if I pronounced it wrong, but it's group 9. Shemai.
Uh, Hi. Our project focus on the teenager pregnancy in the Philippines, and we are thinking about using a digital solution to provide information and support. So you mentioned the issue like AI generating incorrect information. So for a small project like ours, how can we reduce the harmful or inaccurate response early on?
Um, I think probably the biggest advice I give to people when they're working with teenagers and trying to find a solution is never start with the technology. Always start with the insight. So when I hear we're working with teenagers and we're using generative AI, my first question is why generative AI? These technologies are really quite complex. They're hard. They require a lot of capital investments to build and to keep safe. So I would always say start with something, start analog, and then figure out why technology would either scale or improve or enable or enhance that product. But if you can design something that young people want to engage with in a place where they're already engaging and make it work there, then AI will only make it much more powerful or scalable. But if you do want to use AI, what I would first think about is the role, being very, very specific on why and what the role of AI is going to be, and having a very clear understanding of an ethical framework around the use of AI. And I've touched upon this earlier on when do you think it's appropriate to use generative AI and when is it not appropriate to use generative AI? And so once you've kind of clearly defined that role and understand what problem it's going to be addressing, then you'll want to look at building your eval framework. There's a lot of standardized eval frameworks. I'll look at the Agency Fund has just published some standardized eval frameworks. That's a really good basis to starting to ensure that as you're validating your generative AI outputs, how do you ensure that it's being graded for accuracy, safety, or whatever you want your eval frameworks to be. And if you feel like it's generating good results, then I think, and you feel confident that ethically you're delivering something that's scalable but safe, then you should be able to run through those previous design phases of piloting, prototyping, and co-creating with young people. But yeah, I don't know if that helps answer your question. I lost you on my screen.
Thank you.
Okay, now we have group 3. Jean.
Hi. Um, can you hear me? Yeah, our group is about um so our project is about helping the young girl in the Brazil, and we decided to use the AI technology to help them to getting the education. But the rural in Brazil, the AI modeling they are evolving so quickly. So how can we ensure the central infrastructure up to date?
So I can tell you how Girl Effect's approaching that. So we run a model agnostic infrastructure because every week, whether it's Gemini and the leaderboard, whether it's Anthropic or GPT, we've built a system that allows us to plug and play any model. So our infrastructure is model agnostic because being dependent on any one model means that you're also dependent on the policy of that one technology company. And maybe one day, Anthropic is signing a contract with the defense department. Maybe the next day they decide not to. So you want to build an infrastructure that allows you to have independence and greater agency over which models you can choose. I'd look for open source models as well that allow you to leverage them straight out of the box. And you might not have to be dependent on big tech. But the way that we approach it is being model agnostic.
Okay, thank you for your help.
Thank you. So I have a question. This is about we talked about stakeholders, and the question is how are you how what do the typical stakeholder look like? And I know it probably varies from project to project. And then how do you identify the stakeholders in each project?
Um, Yeah, it'll vary from project, but largely the stakeholder will obviously be the beneficiary, the young person that you're designing for, or the user is a critical stakeholder. Oftentimes for Girl Effect, government is a critical stakeholder. We want to be working and supporting their own policies, their own agenda, and at some point advocating and lobbying for change around policies to better support young people. Because a lot of our outcomes are and impact metrics are related to inspiring and motivating young people to access health services, suppliers, working with partners like hospitals, public clinics, pharmacies are a really important stakeholder, and working with them to make those services much more youth friendly. What else would be a stakeholder? Your donor is a massive stakeholder. They set the terms of how to spend your money, and you're constantly trying to anticipate their expectations. And oftentimes you have about 30 donors that you're trying to manage for a single program and trying to align every donor's measurement framework to their own expectations. So they're a critical stakeholder because oftentimes that's your income and you're trying to seek ongoing funds. So they probably have huge influence in the work itself.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Can you give them any suggestions on how they could, if they wanted to get into this field, um, or what do you look for when you're looking for team members?
Yeah. So my favorite interviews are interviews where I'm interviewing someone that's in a hurricane or is conducting field research or is stepping into a side room because they're in the middle of a protest. It's people that are actually doing the thing rather than coming to want to do the thing. So I'm looking for someone with experience and didn't wait for someone to give them that experience, that went out and tried it. And even if they are, if they failed, if they're doing it very, very small, I'm looking for someone that's incredibly proactive and brave and curious. As someone that had independence and decided to move to another country to, work in a small school and just did it on their own. The sector requires a lot of resilience, especially if you're working in a global organization and you're expected to take on many different roles at once, navigate a lot of politics, a lot of environmental disruption, especially in these times, and deliver very tight deadlines with very little resource. So you need to be working with someone that has the resilience, but also passion in the mission, because you're working long hours for not a lot of pay.
And
Yeah.
this is a question. I know you talked about resilience. Can you talk a little bit about the no's and how do you bounce back, like from the no's, like something you may be very excited about or think is a good, then is like, no, that's not. You just get a block there. Like, how do you bounce back from that? And I mean, because in this field, I guess.
Oh my God, the amount of rejection I get, yeah, it's very humbling. Um, you have a lot of patience. I talk a lot about slow design. There's usually this ethos, and I think it was born out of the tech world, like fail fast, like break in, fail fast, and learn fast. In reality, I do think that has a place. What I find that works is someone that's consistently trying to solve a hard problem over a long time, and is willing to persist through the setbacks. Because landscape in the social sector is very volatile, whether working with governments and suddenly there's a coup, or there's a civil war, or there's entire change in government because politics have changed in the 5 years you've spent working with the ministers, wasted, or whether the funding landscape completely, the bottom of it completely drops out, like we saw last year, and all the partners you're working with suddenly shut their doors. You have to be able to weather a huge amount of change. And the world of girls and young people is changing constantly as well. We have to recognize that. The minute you are static, the minute you're trying to just kind of deliver a legacy project for the sake of it, young people move on. How they engage with the world, where they are at, is constantly changing. How they speak is constantly changing. So you have to kind of weather through those change and be really dedicated to a belief in a mission. If you're not dedicated to that mission, if you question or doubt that mission, then it's very difficult to weather through that many changes. So as long as you're passionate in the mission, believe in what you're doing, it's still hard, and it's sometimes really slow to see real results, but it'll happen all the time.
Thank you. Thank you. This was really good. So we have any last questions before we get ready to close out? But can we just say thank you real quick before we close out? Just let's say this was really good. Let's give, if we can give hearts in the chat or thumbs up on the screen, we will love it. Thank you. This was really, I mean, this is really good. I guess the last question, and because these are college students, how important is mentorship?
Um, I think, I mean, I wouldn't have gotten through what I went through without mentorship.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, everyone, I always talk about how everyone's really attracted to the idea of innovation. Innovation is very uncomfortable. When you're trying to work on the world's hardest problems, there's no blueprint. Everything's ambiguous. You have to navigate complete darkness, and it's incredibly uncomfortable. And yeah, people are telling you no, and it often feels like you're trying to push a boulder up a hill, and everyone's literally trying to push it down. 10 years ago, we came up with the idea of, can we build digital tools for girls? Everyone told us it was a bad idea. You were going to deliver harmful products. So the only way to really get through that is to have mentors, people who have gone through maybe not the same experience, but have themselves gone through innovation and delivered products that have scaled and have been successful is really important. So finding someone that can help mentor you through that and help you understand what are the things that you have to worry about, what are the things you don't, what to filter in terms of feedback, what to take on. It's really important to get through those dark moments or those times of, oh, I don't know what I'm doing sometimes.
Thank you. You said you was in fashion world before that.
Yeah.
So do you ever get a chance to utilize, go back or do things in the fashion world? Just curious, just fun.
Oh gosh, I mean, I still follow fashion, but yeah, I don't have time. Maybe one day I'll get back to it.
Yes. Well, thank you so much. This has been really good. We appreciate you. And I wanted to keep it short because I know it's late there, but I do
No,
thank
it's all
you
good.
for coming on
My pleasure.
and talking to us. Thank you so much. This was really good.
Awesome. Good luck, everyone. It was a pleasure. Have a
Thank
great rest of your day.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
so
Bye-bye.
much. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.
All right. So that was speaker two and her presentation reflection thing should be done by next Monday. This week you have Fabian's presentation reflection due. It's 1.5 pages. And if you go to the announcement page, I'm trying to fix the website. I have no idea what's wrong with it. But you go to the announcement page, I put the instructions on there, and that's due. If you go to the Canvas and you go under assignments, you will see where you upload your assignment to. It's under assignment tab, and you go under there, you'll see the three speaker areas. You upload your assignment to that. So you'll see that where you can upload Fabian's for your reflections for Fabian and Karina's is due next week. You have a whole week to think about what you want to write and write a reflection on that. And then we have another guest speaker coming in, and that's Varky, and that's on Wednesday. And so we will have that opportunity to speak to Varkey as well. So let me stop recording because I didn't.